Hi, this is part 3 of a Curvy 3D character creation tutorial. We're creating this gigantic demon creature. This video will cover setting up the camera and doing the initial pose for the character in this scene. So we've created a base mesh model. I've loaded in my original sketch onto an image plane. I've got the pose laid out and the different characters very roughly. It's really just a thumbnail. But it gives us enough to start building the scene. So now if I bring in my base mesh, I can start to scale it and proportion it in the scene. Now it's just about the right size in the front view there in the bottom left, but that's an orthographic view, so there's no perspective whatsoever. And this scene requires a lot of perspective, a very sharp perspective. So I need to set up a camera so I can have exact control over my perspective. So I'm changing the top left view into a camera viewport. At the moment it's just using a default view because I've not created a camera in my world. So to create a camera, it's got three parts. It's got the eye point where you're looking from, where the actual camera would be. And I create a little sphere and call it camera in capitals. And then I duplicate that with Control D and rename that to look at in capitals, and that determines where the camera is looking. So if we drag it up to the head or down to the toes, that's where our camera viewport will be looking at. And the third one we need is the field of view, FOV, and that needs to sit right at the top in the middle of your image. So if I move the FOV to the top of his head, then the camera viewport will be lined up at the top with the top of his head. If you move the FOV side to side, you can see it rotates the camera. So the FOV is basically right at the top in the middle, even if the camera has to rotate to make it in the top in the middle. I'll just move the look at out of his body so we can see where it is. Now I'm going to change the diffuse colour of these spheres so they're easier to see. If I change their alpha down, they would just disappear. If we hide them, then they stop having an effect on the viewport, so they need to be visible even if less of alpha hides them. That lets you have more than one camera. You can choose which camera is visible. Now I'm just blocking out some boxes where I want the other characters in the scene to go. So I've got a small flying mage character and an archer in the foreground. Now both of these boxes are the same size, even though in the camera viewport you can see that the near box is much bigger than the far box, whereas in the side view you can see they're the same size. Now I can change the amount of perspective by moving the camera closer and further away. The FOV and this midpoint ensure that we're still seeing the same amount of the giant, but you get more distortion the closer the camera is. And as I said, in this scene I want quite a lot of distortion. So just relining up the boxes where I want the other characters to go. You can see from the angles of the lines on that box, there's going to be quite severe perspective. I made a simple frame by making a cube and cutting out the middle, just so I can help get an idea of the aspect ratio of my finished image. So I'm just moving that into place in front of the camera. Give me an idea of the cropping, trying out some different angles, going for a bit of a lower angle. Then I have to arrange the other parts to suit. I want the giant to fill up more of the frame, so I'm going to scale up my sketch so it fits the frame. Now some things will always change around, especially if you start with a very small rough thumbnail like this. Okay, I'm going to hide all these bits that I don't want to see and then start posing the main character. So just line up the views ready for posing. I like posing in with the 4 views. So there I'm reducing the alpha on the camera parts, so they're still visible in the scene, they're not hidden, but I've taken the alpha down so they don't show up in the render. If I hide them, it removes the camera viewport from working. So I want them not hidden. So, pressing E to rotate the giant into place. By rotating the perspective viewport, I can choose what axis to rotate around. So if I rotate the viewport so it's pointing down the axis, then the rotation will happen sort of flat in that view. It's another reason it's helpful to either use the assistant view or the camera view. So you've got one 3D view you can move around, and one which is fixed on the sort of viewpoint you want for your final render. So just very simply rotating the arms into place and the head, trying to get the expression I wanted. It's very helpful to have at least some photo reference to get the sort of angles and the expression right, even if you just make it yourself on your phone. I'm going to draw in a very simple version of the sword prop with a loft object. This is just to give me a sense of the size and rough shape of it. Just trimming off the end with the ruler. Need to tweak the end just so I have a little bit of an angle in the middle of the sword, and move it into place next to the hand. Again, it's fairly rough because I'm going to remake that later anyway. It's starting to shape up more like my sketch. I think I'm going to need to play with the perspective a little bit more. Just seeing how it looks without the sketch in the background. So I select my camera back, make them visible again. If you select multiple objects at once, you can change their properties at the same time. So I made all 3 of the camera controls visible at once by changing the alpha slider with them all selected. And I'm trying out different angles, different perspectives. I wanted that fist holding the sword really to push out at the camera, to give a sense of the size of the character. tweaking the look at, so we're focused more on the top half of his torso. And tweaking the FOV, so his head's almost at the top of the frame. Just reshape the sword to fit the frame. And that's the basic pose of the guy done. And hopefully I'll see you in part 4.